thank God they've managed to get Jorginho back on side, because whether people rate him or not, the speed of the Premier League or whatnot, in terms of his mobility, in terms of a player, and a character, not only is he needed as a character, and he does have some sort of leadership qualities, but also he's very unique. We don't have anybody in that team that's picking out a pass from midfield. And what I don't want is, I don't want Kai Havertz to have to drop, because this is what you see with number 10s. If the build-up play is not good, they drop. They drop into those spaces. Pogba does it a lot for Manchester United, and they're partly playing him out of position anyway, playing them next to Matic instead of playing him at the 10. But even when they were playing him at the 10, if you play players that can't progress the ball or do build-up play in midfield, your number 10 will naturally drop deep, and Havertz will naturally drop deep to pick up the ball, or, from the defenders, and start trying to play it out from the back, because we're not getting the ball quickly to him, and he wants to get in the game. So Jorginho, Kovacic, players like this who are not rated in regards to, defensively, maybe they need to improve. When we have the ball, which is the majority of the time, we had a lot of possession last season, where it was 65% of the time. We need to be progressing the ball to these players, because otherwise they're going to get frustrated and we're not going to get the best out of them. So these two players in particular are very important for us. They're very undermined sometimes in this fan base, underrated. And until we buy players that are, I think Partey is a great example at Arsenal, someone that was linked with Matt Law very, very much towards the end of the deadline, someone that can do both sides of the game. He's got the dribbling ability, he's got the ball progression, he can pick up the ball and progress it, but also he's defensively solid as well, and he's got the mobility. So someone that's a bit of more of an all-rounder, I think, is what Lampard's looking for instead of specialists. But until we have the all-rounder, then the specialists are still needed. And it's one of the reasons why after lockdown I wasn't sold on the 4-3-3 with Kante at the base, because I don't feel like Kante is going to progress the ball. I don't feel like he's going to chauffeur the ball the way Jorginho will. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of turnovers in possession. There's going to be a lot of instances, especially in the first half of those games, where we can't get out from the back. We can't build up. And we're gonna end up defending more than we have the ball. And having the ball is a way of defending. So it's going to be interesting to see how he works that midfield dynamic. I thought against Palace we played very well with Jorginho and Kante. We had the best of both worlds kind of thing. But there's no pivot at the moment that is complete, that solves all the issues. So you could maybe expect a bit of rotation there, unfortunately, because I still can't see the perfect recipe in that combination. But if they're going to go over double pivot, we just have to hope that one of them establish some sort of chemistry. I think Kovacic and Jorginho have chemistry, but then they lack something on the defensive side. So we just have to hope that they find some sort of balance between the four of them.
I think the thing you mentioned about sort of Kante and Lampard, at least to me, looking at the start, that Aston Villa game after the 3-month break where he put Kante at the base, and then he stuck with that pretty much until Kante got re-injured. And you were like, okay, so this is what he's going to go for. And I just wonder if he's reverted to bringing back Jorginho because of the fact we couldn't sign Declan Rice or Partey, or I think Samar was linked as well from Lille, or a player of that ilk. And I just wonder maybe further down the line, whether that be January or in the summer, he'll change. But then if he settles on a really good system with Jorginho, what happens then? Because the weird thing to me was, if you look at last season, at least for the first few months, I'd say up until Christmas, or at least that really good period at autumn, which is probably the most consistent and fluid period within Lampard's time so far, where we didn't have Kante because he was injured, and he was playing Jorginho and Cover and Mount as sort of the main midfield three, and it felt like he was very much just continuing what Sarri had done. And it felt very weird to me that he moved away from that. And once he moved away from that, fine. But as you've said, I think they've got, Chelsea have had a midfield balance problem for a number of years now, and I think it's about finding what that next thing is going to be. I don't mind if it involves Jorginho or not, but you got to commit to something. That's the concern. And with Jorginho, I mean, I felt that he had such a good game against Palace, and I think it's on Lampard as a coach to figure out the best balance now. He hasn't got Declan Rice, at least for the short term. If you're in Lampard's shoes, as you've just expressed, it's very difficult to fix that balance at the moment with a pivot. Would you switch to a midfield three?
No, I wouldn't. And the main reason is because I think to get the best out of Kai at the moment, we need to play him in the 10. And I think if you switch to a 3, then you're going to have to play him a bit deeper in the 3. And he's very versatile. I have no problem with that in the long term. But I think right now, there's no one perfect to play lone DM for the way that we play, whether it's Kante, not for me having the ability to build up, receive the ball, or even look or show for the ball, as well as Jorginho will. And then obviously on transition, Jorginho, in the way that we play so open, our lines in between defence and midfield are still for me need to continue to improve. Jorginho can get caught out very quickly there. Sarri played a lot more condensed. So there's no perfect solution. I think with the pivot, and especially also with the fullbacks as well, especially with Chilwell, because his game is so built around, yes, he'll bomb forward and he's got the pace to get back, thank God, but he's going to bomb forward. He's going to provide the overlap for Pulisic. I just think we will be more exposed if we don't go over pivot right now. If I was going to go with three, I would probably have bought a left back that was a little bit more stationary. Yes, they can overlap and get forward, but someone that's a little bit more defensive minded, just to bring a bit of balance to the team, because Reece James is definitely going to go forward, and it just lacks balance for me. But you can't have two fullbacks bombing forward, or at least with the mentality to bomb forward, which they do. And defensively, both still need work in terms of Reece James and Chilwell for me. So I would stay with the pivot. I think with the defensive structure, it'll be easier to organise. Obviously, Barry has come in from Wigan. He's clearly going to make a difference, and he has made a difference. But I think I wouldn't make it difficult on themselves. I would stay with the pivot and just try and find a combination within it, because even with the three, the midfield for me is still not balanced. Yes, you can play Mason Mount there in the 8, and that gets him in, but you need someone to slot alongside whoever's playing DM, whether that be Kante or Jorginho. So we don't have a natural lone DM in the squad. Jorginho plays that position as a regista, but we don't have a natural lone DM in the squad. We don't have a Makalele. We don't have those players. We don't have a Mikel. So I would stick with what we've got in the pivot. It gets the best out of Kai, and I think it will get the best out of the pivot until we can find a solution. I still expect Lampard to sell Jorginho. I think even as a Jorginho fan, a big Jorginho fan of his character and the way he plays and he tries to play the game, I'm not blind to the fact that I know he's not what Lampard wants in a midfielder. And I think that's where the lines get blurred on social media. If you like a player, but then you can't accept the reality of the player's situation in the team. And regardless of him staying in this window, there's no secret that Chelsea tried to get rid of him. They couldn't find a suitor. I think Sarri leaving Juventus didn't help. But also Arsenal coming in the last minute. I think there was is it really worth letting him go to a rival where he will probably improve their team quite a bit with Arteta in charge and the way they try and play. So they was caught in between two minds. Obviously, maybe not getting the money that they want for him as well in this market, but they're definitely trying to get rid of him. I still expect him to leave either in January, but more likely next summer. Less hectic of a transition. So yeah, I'm expecting him to go, and I'm still expecting Lampard to buy the DM that he wants, which is clearly Declan Rice. Even for Declan himself, I think it still would suit him to be in a pivot. He played in the pivot at West Ham. I think putting him lone DM again could expose him. I can still see him being exposed. He's not. I wouldn't call him a road runner. I wouldn't call him someone that can cover every single blade of grass like Kante. If you leave him exposed in transition, I can definitely see him getting eaten alive. So even though he's improved in the last year by quite a bit from when I saw him at Stamford Bridge getting lapped up by Hazard and Loftus-Cheek, I still think if you leave him exposed in a system that's not organised, then he will look just as bad as Jorginho. So we need to be careful with him. He's not the saviour to our prayers. I don't think he's going to come in and change everything, but he's going to bring the leadership. He's obviously what Lampard wants, and regardless of my targets, I always say if the manager wants someone, when he comes in, I'm going to back him. So, but I think it will probably be in Rice's best interest to play in a pivot as well. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does in the next year.
We'll have to see, and I think all this links back to where everything we're talking about so far is certainty within the formation and the system. Because if I know Lampard talks about flexibility, which I don't mind. I don't mind at times if Frank, for a certain opposition, wants to be flexible, wants to go to a back three. It's just, I think, as we've been expressing, if you're constantly changing the type of, because you bring in Jorginho and the characteristic and sort of the dynamic of that midfield configuration completely changes, doesn't it? In terms of you have to sort of adapt to what Jorginho does best. You can't have him pressing up high. You can't have him being exposed. You can't leave him isolated to sweep up and intercept because that's not his game. You've got to allow him to get on the ball. So we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out over the season, short and long term.